Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy sector by sector. Today, we're looking at the area of the unknown regions that I'm going to call the trailing frontier. This is the part of the unknown regions that borders the galaxy's freestanding subsectors on the trailing end, and the standard caveats about the unknown regions being unknown still apply. The trailing frontier is the least explored part of the entire galaxy. Half the planets out here are just places people go into exile in, like Ahch-To, where Luke Skywalker went into exile after the fall of Ben Solo, and Odessen, where Satele Shen went into exile after failing to defend the Galactic Republic from the Eternal Empire. Allegedly. I'm still not convinced the Eternal Empire was real. It's not very well attested in sources, and it sounds suspiciously like a garbled retelling of Darth Revan's Sith Empire, but some version of it might be true, and definitely the part where a Jedi fails to defend the Republic from external invasion and then goes into exile and shame is not at all out of the ordinary for the Old Republic era, which was defined by the constant back and forth between the Republic and the Sith Empire. Luke Skywalker claimed Ahch-To was the origin planet of the Jedi, but that was in his later years, and I honestly think he might have been fucking with us because, how? Losing track of Tython, another alleged origin of the Jedi, and which is a planet in the deep core where hyperspace lanes fall apart after 2 minutes of lapsed maintenance, that makes sense. But Ahch-To is just like a planet. It's remote, but it's not particularly hard to get there if you have a map. Did every single Jedi leave their planet of origin and not one of them thought to bring a map? It's clearly an early Jedi site and might even be pre-Republic, but it's much more likely an outpost with a small population than the origin of the whole order, just because an outpost is way more likely to be wiped out or abandoned. Jakku is an inner rim planet with a population of less than 1 million that got famous because it's along the route from the trailing sectors through wild space and into the Negs, and through the Negs into Coruscant. During the Clone Wars, General Grievous slipped through this path for his raid on Coruscant. In the Galactic Civil War, the Rebels took the same route from Endor to capitalize on the route of Death Squadron. The route was no longer unknown. It's not like people didn't notice when General Grievous used it, so the Empire built a base there on Jakku to intercept any more attacks on Coruscant like this, and so this is where the decisive battle of the Galactic Civil War was fought. Luwek is allegedly the home of an empire of dinosaurs with blasters who tried to conquer the galaxy before being heroically driven back by the Rebel fleet, fresh off the victory at Endor. I know a lot of these legends have grains of truth in them, and probably a lot of them are just straightforwardly true and only count as legends because they're unconfirmed. But the C-Ruvi Imperium is made up. There is no planet Luwek. There was no secret empire of dinosaurs that attacked the galaxy in the final years of the Galactic Civil War. Batuu is a remote planet that allegedly had all kinds of entanglements in the Clone Wars. Supposedly, Anakin Skywalker went there with Grand Admiral Thrawn before he was a Grand Admiral. This would have been coterminous with when Thrawn was busy fighting the alleged Grisk conspiracy in Chiss space, and while I have some skepticism about the details of that story, I think it's way more believable that he was over there than that he was down on Batuu somehow. Usually it's pretty easy to verify stories about what Anakin Skywalker was doing in the Clone Wars one way or another. There were a bunch of clones around, so either they say that yes, Anakin was totally on Christophsis, or they say no, Anakin never fought on Mygeeto, and that's the end of it. For this story, though, Thrawn is conveniently working exclusively with Anakin, and also sometimes Obi-Wan shows up. Noticeably absent, Ahsoka Tano. Ahsoka Tano left the Jedi Order in the closing stages of the Clone Wars, so this isn't impossible, but golly, it sure is convenient that this story happened to take place during the one time in all of the Clone Wars when Anakin Skywalker went an extended period of time out of contact with the one person who could vouch for the authenticity of this story. Now, in fairness, lots of people on Batuu do claim to be eyewitnesses to Thrawn and Anakin being on the planet, which would normally pass my threshold for something being unambiguously verified. But, number one, Thrawn is involved, and Thrawn is a very good liar, so extra caution is advisable. And two, Batuu is really trying to sell itself as a tourist destination and just so happens to be visited by people who are famous in Papanoida films for bullshit missions that had no impact on anything, but allowed a certain cantina owner to say Anakin Skywalker sat on that very bar stool. Thrawn also allegedly went on a mission to Batuu with Darth Vader. Unlike the mission with Anakin, though, there was a bunch of Imperials on hand, so this would have been a lot harder to fake. They were still Imperials who answered to Thrawn, so, constant vigilance. Thrawn could have faked this if he had some kind of reason to, but I'm not sure what his reason would have been, and the number of people around who would have had to get their story straight means it would have required a lot of effort. Anyway, it's not nearly as hard to believe that Thrawn would have been active in Batuu at this point in history. He was part of the Empire at the time. It's not a stretch at all. Also out here is Lehon, otherwise known as Rakata Prime, capital of the Infinite Empire. The Rakatans had an empire that stretched from here in unknown space where you're so far trailing that you're about to be spinwards again, to all the way in Tatooine, which suggests they ruled at least half the galaxy, although no one really knows for sure exactly how much of the galaxy they controlled at their maximum extent, since they're a pre-Republic empire now known only from archaeology. The Rakatans believed in their genetic superiority and used genetic modification to converge their entire species on a single, supposedly perfect form. Turns out that specific gene code was pretty vulnerable to a specific disease, since not one Rakata had immunity or even resistance to the disease. Something like 99% of the species who died, everyone who wasn't able to completely quarantine themselves. Their infrastructure fell apart, and the survivors were mostly too isolated to survive. This is especially true since the Rakata ran a slave empire in which they were generally badly outnumbered by people who hated them. So once the vast majority of them were killed, slave uprisings would pick off the survivors. Rakata Prime itself had a primarily Rakatan population, and there are still some survivors there. Darth Revan and their apprentice Darth Malak came to the planet and learned how to take command of the Starforge there, a Rakatan superweapon that could eat stars and use the energy to produce entire fleets and armies of war droids. Darth Revan would use these forces to create a Sith empire until they were betrayed by their apprentice Darth Malak, but Malak's attempted assassination failed. The Jedi recovered Darth Revan and altered their memories, converting them back to the Republic, but also erasing their ability to disarm the Starforge, so, oops. Revan was able to find their way back to Rakata Prime, break back into the temple containing the ancient secrets, and then break into the Starforge to destroy it, obliterating the source of their rogue apprentice's power, and sending the Sith Empire into an internecine feud for years while the Republic bit off their outlying regions. Thus was the final remnant of the Infinite Empire destroyed. Nominative determinism loses this one. Unless I'm right about the Eternal Fleet being a creation of the Starforge. In that case, the Infinite Empire's remnants persisted for another few generations. Still got destroyed in the end, though.